I'm checking off my procrastination list here during the pandemic, being isolated, somewhat isolated at home. We really don't have it that bad, but what I'm going to work on today is the turn signal self-canceling feature. I installed a new turn signal switch and stalk a while back, and well, I had the steering wheel off, and I should have made the adjustment that I hope is going to make this work back when I did that. The first thing you have to do is you need to center up the steering wheel, make sure you're straight ahead so you can get it back on straight. And then we take off the center cap, and there's the nut that holds the steering wheel. And the first thing I noticed is that there's play in here between the nut and the actual steering wheel. So I didn't get that thing tightened down enough when I put it back together. It's not like the steering wheel is going to come off in my hand, but it can't be good for the splines to be working back and forth like that. So that's one of the things I'm going to take care of while I've got this apart. The next thing we need to do is disconnect the battery so that we don't inadvertently set the horn off while we're working on this thing. I don't know if you've ever been attacked by a horn when you're working on a car, but it can give you a nasty bite because of something that's called inductive snap that we'll work more on in another video. But the main signal, anytime you've got a vibrating electric device, you need to be careful that you don't get across the terminals while it's vibrating. So I've disconnected the ground terminal of the battery and tucked it away to make sure that it doesn't come back and get back in contact with it without my knowledge. You always do the ground terminal, because if you try and undo the positive terminal first, there's a possibility your wrench might get across the positive terminal and ground, and you do some arc welding, and it could even be dangerous. I mean, there have been stories about batteries exploding, being shorted to ground. So always undo the ground terminal, and then you're safe to proceed. I used my trusty 1 5/16 inch socket to remove the nut, and it was finger tight. I don't know, maybe I neglected to tighten this thing up last time I was in here. The next step is to actually pull the steering wheel off. I used anti-seize on the splines when I put it together, so it should come off fairly easily, but it's a two-hand operation, so I'm going to give it a try here. Easy peasy. The thing just rocked off in my hands and came right off of there. Now the next step is to remove the shroud around the turn signal itself. You can see mine's broken. I kind of halfway restored it previously, but you're not going to fix that break. I really need to get a new one. Now that we're in here, I don't know if we're going to be able to focus close enough to see what's going on with this thing or not. This little nub sticking out right here is the canceller, and it hits little teeth that are sticking out in the switch, and I would love to be able to get in close enough to, but it's just not going to focus that closely for me. But there are little metal ears down in there that it comes in contact with. Now here's some things that I learned putting my steering back together. First off, you got to have the steering column and everything all in alignment. It's very important that this nub here is sticking out at a right angle when you're going straight. Okay, so when you got the turn signal set left or right, and you turn this little nub on the steering column, goes around and pushes up on a lever. Actually, it pushes up on the lever on the return as it's coming back from the turn. So it's got to be adjusted so that it hits that lever fully enough that it pushes the lever up out of the way to cancel the turn signal. My canceling nub here needs to be turned out, so I'm going to use a 5/16 socket wrench to loosen that lock nut. I'll probably take it out and free it up, clean up the threads and everything, and because I have no idea how locked up it is. I found it necessary to loosen up the clamp bolts here so that I could slide the steering tube just fractions of an inch to make the steering, the cancellation nub line up directly with the little pawls that it comes in contact with in there. So it's tight clearances in here. You get it out, adjusted out far enough to hit the pawls, and it wants to foul this part right here. So it's kind of a compromise, and it might take some judicious filing or something like that to give yourself enough clearance. It's all really close. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is that your horn commutator has to line up with the brass band around the steering column here. When you're tightening these steering clamp bolts, you need to use a number 3 posi-drive screwdriver. At least mine was. This is a later one. I don't know if the earlier ones used posi-drive or not. If you don't know what posi-drive is, Google it and learn how to identify posi-drive screws and screwdrivers. Posi-drive is a distinct improvement over Phillips head. Gets a much better grip on the head, less likely to jump out and tear up the head of the screw. So I checked the clearance on everything. Everything's working both directions. I put a little daub of grease on the end of the canceller nub there, and it'll transfer itself to the fingers that it hits inside there. Recheck the alignment of the horn commutator, and it's looking pretty good. So everything should be in good shape. I'm gonna put the cover back on this and then put the steering wheel back on, and this time I'm gonna tighten it down. Another thing I learned when finishing up my restoration is that the correct orientation of this pinch bolt is across the top of the steering column when the steering column is correctly adjusted and installed. If you got it on the bottom or it's cranked around to the side or something like that, then something's out of whack. All back together, battery reconnected, horn works. I tested the canceling function and it does cancel. So this project is a success.
Oh no, I can't believe it. How will I ever get out of this mess without her?